and they used the fence, the barriers that were used for the police, they were actually used to wall off and create this temporary new autonomous zone in Washington, which was immediately broken up. So the big question is this war on history. Over 100 monuments have been taken down since May 25th. 100 monuments and plaques. Everything from George Washington to Francis Scott Key, and now the removal of Teddy Roosevelt. So yesterday, in part of a special we're doing that's going to air on Sunday, which is the history of the White House, which is 230 years old, the President of the United States talked to me about the statues. This is 1 hour before they targeted Andrew Jackson, which is about, Steve, would you say like right down the block? It's like
it's across the street
across the street, a half mile away. So here's what he said is the problem with tearing down imperfect people. We're in a war on history. They want to take Jackson statue out of New Orleans without Battle of New Orleans. We're not the same country.
I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. I don't like anything that's going on. Now, federal, I've stopped. I've stopped federal. But the states are, a lot of states are weak. A lot of people are weak, and they're allowing it to happen. Hey, it's going over a little bit around the world now. They want to remove the statue of Gandhi, okay? All he wanted was peace. They want to take down Ulysses S. Grant. Well, he's the one that stopped the Confederates, right? So, you know, he was a great general. He turned, nobody's stock went higher than his stock over the last 10 or 15 years.
But do you understand how you look at Thomas Jefferson, you look at George Washington, you look at James Monroe, look at James Madison. One thing they had, they were brilliant. They also had slaves.
Yeah.
So how do we grow as a country, but yet not forget our past?
So you have to understand history, and you have to understand the culture and so many other aspects of our country. And people can study that, and they can hate it, and let's all hate it. But you can't take down George Washington's statue, and half of our country is named after Washington. You can't. We have to remember the heritage, the culture of our country. And, you know, this is less important, but it's very important. Some of the things that they're trying to destroy are magnificent pieces of art. Have you ever seen an area where a statue was removed and you look at the area and they put blacktop over the top of it? They put asphalt over the top, and that's the end? And it was the center of a town or a village, and now the statue's gone, and the whole village is like a different place. And here's the other problem I have. A lot of these people that want it down don't even know what they're taking down. I watch them on television, and I see what's happening, and they're ripping down things. They have no idea what they're ripping down. But they started off with the Confederate, and then they go to Ulysses S. Grant. Well, what's that all about? And they would knock down Lincoln. There's a group that wants to take down Lincoln. They haven't figured out exactly why yet. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. I've stopped them twice now from going over to the Jefferson Memorial. If I weren't president, they would have knocked down, if a guy like Biden was president, they will knock down the Jefferson Memorial. Not going to happen.
Obviously, kind of ominous was right between the Jackson portrait, right there. Nobody says you're on a statue because you're perfect. You're on a statue, you're memorialized because the people in that generation said you made a huge impact. No one doubts that Andrew Jackson was imperfect, but also nobody doubts that he made a huge impact on an entire generation, not just his 8 years in office, leading up to there as a major general, an orphan at 13, fighting in the war at 14, loses his entire family, finds a way to become a major general, a war hero, and a two-term president. My goodness, how dare you put a rope around his neck and try to tear down his statue when you see the people of that time and that generation, the nation mourned when he passed. And then to see this 1 hour later, guys, is totally disconcerting. I'm just wondering where Democrats are. He's a Democrat. We're the Democrats who should be equally outraged. We should be able to come together on this.
Well, you know, the thing about Jackson, Brian, and he's been a target in that park for a very long time, in addition to owning slaves, you know, it's about the fact that he signed the Indian Removal Act, which back in the 1860s, I think, what it did, 1830s, that is to say, during the fall of 1838, I believe, was when they moved all those Cherokee Indians. They had that forced march. Thousands died. It was the so-called Trail of Tears. And that is why so many people are angry, because he is a symbol. However, the president did say yesterday as well that what he's going to do is he will sign an executive order to protect the statues, essentially by making the cities guard their monuments, Ainsley. So you know what? He's sick of it, and he's going to try to do whatever he can to stop it.
Yeah, he was tweeting yesterday. Senator Tom Cotton was tweeting yesterday, and both of them were saying that these individuals could actually get 10 years behind bars because there is the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act, Title 18 of the U.S. Code,
And that's already on the books.
Section 1369, 10 years for destruction of a veteran's memorial. The protesters that were trying to take down the Andrew Jackson statue were chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Andrew Jackson's got to go." One person said, "Welcome to the AZ, the autonomous zone. You are now leaving the U.S." So, yes, the president did vow that he is going to sign an executive order saying that making sure these cities guard these monuments so that this doesn't happen. The D.C. police, U.S. Parks had to get out there. They used a chemical irritant to disperse the crowd. Officers were hit with objects and numerous people were arrested.
I'd just like to add something real quick on the Trail of Tears. Martin Van Buren was president at the time. It was almost as very similar to it. Eisenhower had the plan to invade Fidel Castro's Cuba, and it was Kennedy that used the plan. Martin Van Buren used the plan that he thought that Jackson left for him, and it ended up being a disaster for the Indian community and for a stain in our country. But he also adopted an American Indian son, and he also, yes, he fought Indians, but the American Indians were the tribes that fought with the British against us in the War of 1812. Right. I don't know if you were rooting for the British in the War of 1812, but I'm not.
Well, I was just trying to explain why there has been anger toward Jackson and that particular statue in Washington for a while. Meanwhile, as we saw in Griff's report, you know, they spray painted on St. John's Church, BHAZ, Black House Autonomous Zone. Well, that's now on the East Coast. On the West Coast, remember the Chaz or Chop? Well, the mayor said yesterday she's had enough because they had 3 people shot over the weekend, and what they're going to do is they are slowly going to phase out the Chop or the Chaz, and the police are going back to the East Precinct. This is a victory for law and order. Here's the mayor, Jenny Durkin.
The gun violence unfolding at night is not only wrong, it also is undermining and distracting from the message for change that we are hearing in the street and in so many of the peaceful protests. We are working with community to bring this to an end. Capitol Hill belongs to everyone in this city. SPD will be returning to the East Precinct. We will do it peacefully and in the near future, but it is clear while the physical space is important, we are going to focus our greatest efforts on reimagining policing itself.
Brian, you want to set this up? Because I know you want to talk to the president.
Just to finish this up, this mayor is an embarrassment. This mayor said it's going to be the summer of love, and there's no end to how long the autonomous zone would last. And as predicted by every law enforcement expert or people in the Seattle area, they said this is going to be violence. It is crazy in there. She called all those people essentially out of touch and didn't know what they were talking about. She gave up the police precinct. She embarrassed the whole police force, and now she's going to crack down and said this is time to come in. This is an embarrassment. That's got to be a lesson to other mayors, as liberal as you may be. Understand the downside. People will die if you tell the police to back out and you put in a cabinet drawer law and order. And that's what this presidential run is going to be about. It's going to be less about Biden and Trump and more about what you see in Seattle and then the results that we all are witnessing in Seattle.
And Brian,
you got to decide what you want.
The one who died on Saturday, 19 years old.
Unbelievable.
The one who was shot on Sunday was 17 years old, shot in the arm.
Cops couldn't even get in, and they were forced to retreat. And that humiliation is going to force a mass resignation. Right. You just watch.
Now, Brian, when you were at the White House, I don't know if you saw it, but across the street over by the Black Lives Matter Plaza, apparently over the last number of days, a number of tents have been assembled, and that's where people have been congregating. And yesterday, the police apparently said, you know what? We gotta end this right now because it's a public safety issue. It was way too close to the traffic, and so they cleared the tents out. But there were a lot of people down in Tulsa over the weekend, not as many as the president was planning on, Brian. They had suggested maybe 1 million. I'm sure that came up in your conversation with POTUS as well.
Yeah, and he got a news story while I walked in there from FoxNews.com that talked about Fox coming with the highest ratings in the history of our network on Saturday to watch his rally. And as he tries to evaluate where he's going to go forward or how he's going to go forward with these rallies, he says he should keep that. He's going to keep that in mind. This is what I asked him. It was the first time since as a candidate or as president you did not sell out an arena. Does that make you want to?
When I went there, it was the first time. Now, I heard 2 weeks of nothing but you are going to die if you go. You are going to die. You'll never live again. You'll never breathe again if you walk into that very beautiful arena. They treated us very nicely, except for one problem. They called a curfew. So people that were in line had to leave. You had people sitting, waiting for 4 or 5 days in advance, and they called a curfew, and they had to leave. I don't know where they went, but they had to leave. You know that. And then I called up, and I said, it shouldn't be curfew. I called the mayor, and I said, Mayor, you can't do a curfew. It's not fair to our people. They called a curfew because you had some very bad people coming. They did come, and the police did a good job, but they called curfew, number one. Number two, you had nothing but horrible press for a week and a half, 2 weeks leading up to it, that you were going to be in bad shape if you walked into the arena, and various other things. Now, despite that, we actually had a good crowd. For anybody else, it would be a good crowd. But I agree with you. It's the only time that I've had a vacant seat since I came down the escalator with the First Lady. But this just came out. As you came in, you didn't give this to me, but this just came out. And people have to see this. Trump rally, you see what that says? Gives Fox News the largest Saturday night audience in its history. So, my speech the other night was the largest audience in the history of Fox on Saturday night. That covers many, many years and many, many big shows. So this speech, now, let me give you this. Online, it was even bigger than this. So online, you have many different sites, but they say it was the biggest thing in a long time. Now, nobody's going to write that. And the reason I talk about it is because if you don't tell it yourself, nobody else is going to.
You can't say nobody.
Because you've been fair.
Yeah,
no. Fox put it out.
Yep.
I mean, Fox put it out. So it's the biggest, the largest Saturday night audience in its history. Nobody's going to say that. I'll say it. I'm saying it now. If I didn't say it, they'll put it out. Nobody's going to pick it up because the fake news won't do that. But think of what that means. Now, a lot of people saw it. A lot of people went to Tulsa, and it was rough because they had, you know, so-called protesters, anarchists, and various other people. And they said, let's go home and watch it on television. But this is much more important. We had a very nice crowd of warriors. They were warriors. But it's the first empty seat, but these are the best ratings we've ever had.
Interesting.
I think that means something, because that to me is like a poll.
Right.
And online, even better.
And you know what's telling about that? You know, congratulations to us at Fox because we had the biggest Saturday night in primetime ever. But the lesson is the fact that we carried it from the beginning to the end live. A couple of times I clicked over to CNN and MSNBC, and they weren't carrying it. So obviously there's an interest in it. I think a lot of people tuned in the beginning to see, is there going to be trouble? Because there were stories about anarchists, and that's why they did institute that curfew going forward. And then, you know, I clicked over again, and all they were talking about on one of the other channels was about the crowd size. They actually were not listening to the president, but they were showing the inside of the arena. So maybe the lesson is, if you show it, people will watch it.
You know what I take away from this is, okay, you saw the crowds, and if you are a supporter of the president, you might think, oh gosh, he's going to be in trouble in November because he couldn't fill the seats. But no, now you look at these numbers, people just did not want to go to the rally. Many people are still in fear about being in big crowds like that.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at those numbers, you compare them, I mean, 7.7 million total viewers on Saturday night. You know how many the draft got? Almost the same amount, 8 million. Draft got a little bit more than Fox did on Saturday night. I mean, that's huge. Everyone around the country watches the draft. Trump's State of the Union address got 8.2 million. So those were big numbers for Fox. But yeah, the curfew thing, Brian, I'm glad you asked him about that because I didn't think about that. All those people are out there waiting in line to get inside, and they're sitting out there on lawn chairs. Many of them had been out there for several days, and then they implement the curfew because they were scared of the violence. So then those people in line had to leave. I wish they would have said, if you're peaceful and you're sitting in line, we will allow you to stay so you can get inside.
Yeah, a couple of things. To Steve's point yesterday, it's got to be an open air. You got to do something.
Absolutely.
Open air. Number two is
We've been
just
saying that for weeks on this show.
And you could also say diminished crowd size. It's going to be streamed. You could see, if you're comfortable coming out, I'm going to be in Arizona. You're comfortable coming out, I'm going to be in North Carolina. I understand if you don't want to, but make sure you watch. We're going to be streaming because this is the message I'm going to be bringing to November. And the other thing is there's clearly friction between the old band and this band of the Trump campaign. Corey Lewandowski was critical and others of the way they're running things now, and I'm wondering if there's going to be a merger, a mind meld between them. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead, crisis in Chicago as the city sees its worst weekend of gun violence in years. What is happening and can it be stopped? We're going to talk to a local pastor who has made it his mission to end the violence next.
President Trump sounding off on his former national security advisor, John Bolton, as his new book hits shelves today, saying that he should go to jail for publishing classified information.
Well, here to react is Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, in those comments the president made yesterday anticipating the release of his book today, he expanded on what legally he has to go on with that. I want to see what you think about the president's case. John Bolton came out and said that doesn't work with country to country. What's your reaction to that?
Look, this is a guy with no personality. All he wanted to do is drop bombs on everybody. He was one of the many people that got us into the war in the Middle East, which was a big mistake. I said to him, let me ask you, do you think, recently, I said, what did you think? He said, I think we made the right decision. I said, you lost me there. It was the worst decision in the history of our country. I know you may disagree with that. Worst, well, now you might agree. At the time, you would have, felt differently. But also, the Libyan model, you know what that means, right? Look it up. One of the dumbest things ever said, I think it was said on Deface the Nation, the Libyan model. He said the Libyan model, that was set us back. You have no idea. John Bolton was a stupid guy, and he was a guy with no heart. And he also had a statement that he would lie whenever he had to. He has that statement. It's a well-known statement. And I fired him, and I didn't think it was a big deal. And I wasn't around him very much. But what he did do is he took classified information and he published it during a presidency. It's not, it's one thing to write a book after, during. And I believe that he's a criminal. And I believe, frankly, he should go to jail for that.
Judge? I know I don't know if you've read the book, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, I have not read the book, Brian. My familiarity with the book is based upon the legal pleadings that the DOJ filed, and quite frankly, on your terrific interview with him yesterday, which is very, very enlightening. The president has a good point. It's almost unheard of that someone would be accused, a former confidant of the president's, of spilling national security secrets during the same presidency. But the Justice Department has two problems here. One is they waited too long, too late to bring this action to stop the book from being published before a court. So the court basically said, look, if this stuff is so serious, why weren't you here a month ago? Why did you wait until after 250,000 copies of his book had been distributed? The other is, I don't know what the secrets are in this book, and the judge didn't know what the secrets were in the book until they went into chambers with just John Bolton's lawyer and the DOJ lawyers and the judge, and the press wasn't there, and they pointed out what the national security secrets are. So at some point we will find out, Brian, just how serious and how damaging this is. If it's serious and damaging, the president is right. The Justice Department can pursue John. They can get a judge to order Simon & Schuster, his publisher, to preserve all income derived from the sale of the book.
But Judge,
and the Justice Department can attempt to seize that.
Judge, as
they
you
could
know,
also
that
try
judge
and persuade a grand jury that this was a criminal act. So the president's right. The issue is, was it a criminal act? Are there secrets in there? One last thing, Brian. In the DOJ's complaint against John Bolton, they reflect that at one point he did receive clearance for the book.
That's what I was going to say.
He did.
Yeah.
And then a new team came in,
Right.
headed by Bob O'Brien, the current National Security Advisor, and that team said, we don't like the book. There's too many things in there that shouldn't be published. You got to get them out.
And Judge, you know
published
from the
it
filing what it also said was because Mr. Bolton contacted the Department of Justice or the NSA and said, okay, you're going to sign off on this. And they said on May the 7th, they said, we'll let you know on, I think, June 19th, last Friday. But the books had already been published. So what, going forward, whether or not they look for criminal liability, is this really, a lawsuit that this administration wants played out in court?
Probably not, Steve. That's a great question because everybody's going to have to testify if they do, including the people no longer in the National Security Council in the Donald Trump's White House who authorized the printing of the book several months ago and on which John Bolton relied when he told his publisher, yeah, I'm clear, you can go ahead and print it. It will be a little bit embarrassing, but the president knows what these secrets are. I don't, we don't. So it depends on what they are and how damaging they might be. The Justice Department might be wise to sit on its hands. It might be unwise to sit on its hands. We're going to have to wait and see.
Judge, the people who are the diehard Trumpers, they're going to vote for him no matter what. The liberals who hate him, they're not going to vote for him. They'll vote for Biden. How does this affect the middle of the road, someone who hasn't made up their mind yet?
That's a great question. The president's doing a very effective job, I think, as he did with Brian yesterday, in undermining John Bolton's credibility. In fact, I saw some old clips of an interview I did with John Bolton on my old Freedom Watch show on Fox Business, in which he said sometimes certain truths are so strong that you have to lie in order to protect them. I looked at him, I said, John, what are you talking about? He said, I said, would you lie to protect a truth? And he said, yes, of course I would. I don't know, Ainsley, if the American people really get into the weeds on that. I think the American people will take the big picture on Donald Trump. Either you like him because of what he's doing or you don't like him because of the way he does it.
Judge, I don't know how you did it. That background, your head's perfect between your lamps.
Right. And
I mean, it's just ideal. I don't know who your set designer is.
Every morning, somebody gets in my ear and says, move a half an inch this way, move a half an inch that way, come just a little closer, move back.
We have that same voice in our head.
I can't wait till I'm back in the studio with you guys.
Perfect.
I know. It is nice to be back. Those chairs are beautiful, by the way. Thanks so much, Judge, for being with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It started out a
best,
legal
guys.
segment and turned out
He has great taste.
He does, right. It's like Victorian, am I right?
Right. Very English, right?
Yeah, very.
Look, Castle-esque.
Probably from the Queen.
Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
All right, Jillian's upstairs. She has some headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
Good morning. Let's start off your headlines with this. The FDA is warning